Hello, this is Brian Oughton of Apologetics 315. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Craig Hazen. Craig is founder and director of the MA program in Christian Apologetics at Biola University and also the professor of comparative religion and apologetics. He edits the philosophy journal Philosophia Christi, and he is author of numerous articles as well as the books Five Sacred Crossings and The Village Enlightenment in America. The purpose of our interview today is to get to know a bit more about Craig, gain some insights from his experience, and to ask him about some of the educational opportunities that he sees available to apologists today. So, Craig, thanks for taking the time to speak with me today.
My pleasure, and it's great to be on with you, and I appreciate your ministry so much.
Well, thank you. If some of our listeners are like me, they know you as the head of the apologetics program at Biola, and they've also heard of Biola as one of the top places to go to get apologetic training. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's your background?
Yeah, I grew up in a non-Christian home, became a Christian as a senior in high school, and in fact, it was at a gigantic Calvary chapel here in Southern California. And I remember that you probably heard of the great evangelist, Greg Laurie. He was the guy preaching on this particular Monday night. And there was a guy named Keith Green, who a lot of people have forgotten about. But I remember him well. He was playing the music that night. And the Lord moved on me, and I went forward to respond to the gospel as a senior in high school. But I had all kinds of questions. And I remember them taking us into a back room, and there were all kinds of new believers who had come forward, and there were a number of counselors. Well, within a few minutes, I was the only new believer there, and the rest of the counselors were surrounding me trying to answer my questions. And God bless these people. Although they didn't really have some great answers for me on the spot, they knew just where to point me. And so they pointed me to some great literature by some of the finest Christian minds around. And in the weeks that followed, the Lord really solidified the deal in my mind. I'd had an experience of the heart, and He ended up giving me everything I need to have a satisfied mind. So that really set my trajectory in terms of apologetics. That's how I got into the business and got this mindset.
Now, how did that lead into getting into the field of apologetics for you?
I love ideas. In fact, I'm one of those characters who, when I went to college as an undergrad, I wanted to major in everything. I ended up majoring in biological sciences, but I must have taken every philosophy and religious studies course I could get my hands on. I'd become a Christian as a senior in high school, and I was beginning to explore the Christian faith, and I was doing it while on a secular university campus. And so that was very exciting. I think that's if you have the constitution for it, you have the right makeup, it's a great way to get involved in trying to articulate the big ideas for Christ in face of some stiff opposition. Mm-hmm. So it was during that time on the secular college campus, majoring in biology and taking philosophy and religious studies, that I became just enamored of ideas. I just loved ideas, and I just wanted to spend my life in the middle of them. It seems to me the best way to do that was to actually do graduate work in philosophy or religious studies. I ended up doing a bachelor's degree in biological sciences and engaged in biology research during that time, and just loved it. And then I'm thrilled about my background in science, because that's something you just can't pick up any time. It's not like if you don't get a lot of that during your undergraduate years, it's difficult to pick up some of the details of that area of study later on. So I'm really grateful for that. But it dawned on me, I think it was one spring term, maybe it was my sophomore or junior year in college. I was there just memorizing organic chemistry reactions. I thought, you know what, there's more to life than organic chemistry reactions. Although I'm happy to know this is not the kind of thing that really causes controversy, that goes to the deepest level of the human condition. And so I really started to pursue philosophy and religious studies. And there was a new school that had opened up not far from my home called the Simon Greenleaf School of Law. And the founder of this school was John Warwick Montgomery, one of these guys who has more degrees than a thermometer. I had gotten to know him through some lectures he'd given in Southern California and decided to enroll in his school even before I'd finished my undergraduate work. And so they had a master's degree in Christian apologetics, and I dove headfirst into it and took about every course I could get my hands on then. That was my first formal training in the area.
Now, did you run into Greg Kokel over there? Because I think that it might have been something he had part in as well at Simon Greenleaf.
I did. In fact, I had some wonderful friends there, like Frank Beckwith and Greg Kokel and a whole host of others who've gone on to do wonderful things in apologetics. So those were some fun days. I got to study under John Warwick Montgomery and Rod Rosenblatt of the White Horse Inn now. And in fact, Tim Riddlebarger of the White Horse Inn was also one of my fellow students. We enjoyed it thoroughly. Studied cults and new religions under Walter Martin. Those were fun times.
Huh. Now, as you were starting out, and this is a question I ask everybody, what sort of books were most influential for you?
You know, the hot books in apologetics at the time and the things that people were putting in my hands just as I was entering the Christian faith were the typical books like More Than a Carpenter and Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and books like The Kingdom of the Cults by Walter Martin and History and Christianity by John Warwick Montgomery. Those were my introductions, my first steps into apologetics, and very helpful. That's why I've never poo-pooed these introductory books. You know, some people, they hear about, you know, the Case for Christ and the Case for Faith and so on by Lee Strobel, and they think that that's not serious literature. You know, I think it is. I think it plays a very important role in introducing people to the whole world of Christian thought, philosophy, and apologetics.
Now, as far as mentors or apologists or different philosophers that have been influences on you, what two or three would come to mind?
Boy, it's hard to think back in the past. John Warwick Montgomery, of course, was a huge influence. In fact, I still continue a relationship with him today. But that's at a great distance, and that was in the early days primarily. But I am so blessed to have colleagues that I have regular contact with, like J.P. Moreland, one of my best friends, and William Lane Craig and others, who are just dear people. They're not just brilliant men who write books and debate and give stirring lectures, but these are amazing men of God who spend a great deal of time encouraging their co-laborers in the faith. Mm-hmm. And it's just a joy to work with these guys.
Now, you're also the editor of Philosophia Christi, Christian philosophy journal. So tell our listeners about what that is and where they can find that.
That's a remarkable publication. Philosophia Christi. It has been around for over a decade. Actually, it goes back further than that. But in its recent incarnation, we decided to upgrade it about 10 years ago. And it looks fantastic, and it reads fantastic, and it is cutting edge in terms of Christian philosophy, but really just philosophy of religion in general. In fact, I haven't checked recently, but I would imagine it's still true that it's the top circulating philosophy of religion journal in the world. You know, and most of the major research universities have a subscription in their library to this thing, and first-rank philosophers, whether they're Christian or not, have subscriptions to this journal. It comes out twice a year, and it deals with all of the major topics that Christian apologists are interested in. But it goes into these topics at a very deep level, and it engages in debates on these topics like the existence of God, the problem of evil, intelligent design, miracles, you name it. We deal with it. And we go at it hammer and tongs with the opposition, and we love every minute of it. And I think the atheist and agnostic community likes it a great deal too. I think they've appreciated our journal. But it always strikes me that the secular world has had the first and the last word on so many of these issues because they are in control of the publications and the the channels of communication. But this is a chance where we have an opportunity to have the first and the last word, and we make sure our opposition has a very loud voice in the midst of this. Mm-hmm. But who'd have thought that a group of Christians, evangelical, Bible-believing, Jesus-loving folks, would actually be running the top philosophy of religion journal on the planet? It just shows you that we've really got the goods, and Christian philosophy and Christian thinking is coming of age in a new way. in this generation.
Is there a website for that?
Yeah, here it is. Write this down. EP Society. EPSociety.org. That stands for Evangelical Philosophical Society. So it's EPSociety.org. And not only can you subscribe to the journal there, and it's very inexpensive, you can also read our wonderful blogs and keep track of what's going on in the world of Christian philosophy, including our annual Apologetics Conference this year in fall of 2010. It'll be in Atlanta, and we'd love to see people there.
Now, you're also the author of a couple of books here. Now, one of them is a Christian novel in apologetics, The Five Sacred Crossings. Tell us about that, and what do you mean this is an apologetics novel?
Yeah, I really wish it wasn't qualified in that way. I wish it were just a novel, and that's kind of what I wanted it to be. But the publisher thought it would sell better if they made a big deal about the fact that it does apologetics in some way or another. In fact, they gave it a subtitle called A Novel Approach to Reasonable Faith. And I don't know if that's helped it or not, but it's done very well, and I've been very happy with it. But really, it's a novel into which I wove important ideas that show that Christianity is different than the other world religions in dramatic ways. That's something that's always been on my heart. My doctoral work is in religious studies, and I did that at University of California at Santa Barbara, really a first-rate religious studies program. So I had a chance to learn about all the great religious traditions. And what struck me during my graduate days at UCSB was that Christianity stands apart in dramatic fashion on a number of counts. But there's 5 reasons in my mind that make the most sense as to why Christianity is different. And those are woven into this story called Five Sacred Crossings. And I've gotten wonderful feedback on this book. I suppose one could say it's in some respects it's like the Da Vinci Code in that Dan Brown told a fast-paced, page-turning novel into which he included a whole bunch of religious ideas that just weren't true. So I wanted to write a fast-paced, page-turning novel that actually included true ideas about the world and Christianity. And I think I've succeeded, and people have really enjoyed it. And people who would never, pick up an apologetics textbook, the kinds of things that we might enjoy, they have been picking up this, and they've been passing it along. And especially to their New Age friends or their atheist friends, it's been quite a hot item outside the Christian community because it introduces important truths in what I call the side door method. People are getting struck by the unique claims of Christianity in ways they've never heard it before. So that always delights me when I hear those reports.
For those who aren't familiar with Biola, can you tell them a little bit about Biola?
Yes. Biola is a delightful university here in Southern California. It's 100 and some years old. It must be 102 because we just celebrated the 100th anniversary 2 years ago. And Biola was founded as a school that really highlights Scripture and outreach. Scripture and outreach. We're in love with God's Word, and we're in love with fulfilling the Great Commission here. And we do that in so many ways. But it's interesting that some people think of Biola as maybe a 100-year-old fundamentalist institution. I suppose back in the day when fundamentalist actually meant something good, that might have been true. But it really kind of blows people's minds to find out that Biola, although it's remained very solid in terms of biblical inerrancy and very strong in all of the essential doctrines of the Christian faith, it turns out we've also got more students studying philosophy at the graduate level than any school in the world. Now, that blows people's minds. They think maybe more people studying the Bible or theology, but no, we have more people studying philosophy. And that doesn't even count my apologetics program. We have, nearly 200 graduate students in Christian apologetics, but we've got a huge graduate program in philosophy. And some of the other standout programs here are programs like the Torrey Honors Institute, which is an undergraduate great books program, which might be one of the finest educations on the planet. Really, it's that good. It was started by my good friend and just a brilliant scholar named John Mark Reynolds. And I hope you get a chance to interview him someday because he is so fascinating and delightful to talk to. But those are some of the highlight points about Biola. But there's about 6,000 students on our campus. It just is an institution. As an institution and as a body of believers, we're really committed to, making a nuisance of ourselves for Jesus in our generation.
Now, how did you end up overseeing the MA program in apologetics at Biola?
Well, I had the good fortune of starting it, so they haven't been able to get rid of me. So I oversee it because I started it and have watched it grow over the years. And I thought I had an idea when I started this program that it would be very popular. And the reason I thought that was I just noticed as I traveled around in churches that churches, by and large, used to be able to ignore these kinds of issues, giving reasons for faith. But they can't do so very much or very well anymore. The secular world is encroaching upon the church's turf like never before. I see parents alarmed, at what their kids are learning in public schools, sometimes even in Christian schools. How they get alarmed and they don't know how to respond, and so they immediately turn to my colleagues, the faculty in my department here, to ask for help. So people are concerned that they're losing their confidence that they can present Christ and then answer the kinds of questions that are almost immediately going to follow.
So if someone's interested in apologetics and they're thinking about their options, they've heard about the Biola program, what should they expect in that master's program? What sort of work is that? What sort of commitment is that? And what are they getting into?
They're getting into the time of their life. Our students love this program. It is a Master of Arts degree program. That is, you have to have a bachelor's degree in any field. Some of our students come with bachelor's degree in business and art or biology or accounting. It doesn't matter. If you have a bachelor's degree in any field, you can enter our Master of Arts degree in Christian apologetics. And it's a wonderful first step and a rather deep step into the field of apologetics. It's a 36-semester unit graduate degree. Most of our students do it in 2 or 3 years, and most of our students are sort of middle-aged professional people. They're generally not people who come straight out of undergraduate programs, although we have some of those too. But the typical student looks like an airline pilot or a veterinarian or a school teacher, engineer, an attorney. Our classrooms are just filled with bright professional people who've always wanted to study this kind of thing, and they just never had a chance. And so they get to take wonderful courses in philosophy of religion, evidence for the resurrection, why God allows evil, studying our standard Bible defense class, Scripture, authority, canon, and criticism. And we have this wonderful lecture series called the Defending the Faith lecture series, for which our graduate students get credit. And we have courses in world religions and in various cults like Mormonism and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And you name it, we've got it. And in fact, most of our students look at our catalog and say, I want to take every course you have to offer. Of course, they'd be here till they were ripe old people, but we've got it. And it's a very exciting curriculum, and it turns out to be very functional, too. It really does prepare people well to, contend for the faith, as we're admonished to do so in Jude 3.
Now, you mentioned such a wide variety of people taking the course. What do you think most people's goal in getting a degree in apologetics is?
So many of our students just come in for personal enrichment. They really do. They come in thinking, I'm not going to change my career. I'm an airline pilot. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm going to keep doing this for another, 15 years or so. But I've just always wanted to study this. But what ends up happening with these people is they go back to their churches, and their churches find out that they know something about this. They can actually give a short course on solving the problem of Darwinism, or they can give a course on why the Scriptures are reliable, or evidence for the resurrection. And the churches are all over this, and they end up teaching special classes, and they become wonderful resources for their church community. Other students we're kind of astounded how many people have gone out and used this for gainful employment. You know, some people end up being missionaries or doing campus ministry or actually doing church work. We've actually had a couple people end up becoming resident apologists for their churches, which we'd always dreamed that that would happen, but to see it actually coming to pass is really a joy. Many of our students have gone on to graduate school, PhDs in religious studies and history and philosophy and theology. And then they are popping into jobs around the country, and I think they're going to have a long-term impact for the Lord. So some of our students have gone on to be radio broadcasters and writers, and we're stunned to see how many directions they've gone with this.
Well, that's phenomenal. Now, I also know that you have a distance learning program, and I'm sure that's appealing to quite a few people, especially if, you know, as you say, they've got a career and they've got family commitments and things. And tell us about how that distance learning program works.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about that, because some people think, well, distance learning, that's like a second-tier form of education, right? Not in our program. We did not just create some distance learning program that took what was going on in the classroom and sort of threw it online in some unthoughtful fashion. Rather, we redesigned what we were doing educationally to make it sizzle in terms of people doing coursework at a distance. And so we have wonderful graduate seminars online where students are fully engaged in everything that's going on. They'll read some wonderful writings. They'll write some short essays and post them online. And then the students will get together online and hash out issues. And we'll give this one grad student the mantle of being the leader for the week on a particular topic. And so he or she has to ask all the hard questions, and the other graduate students engage and banter back and forth. Our professor is always monitoring the discussion and jumps in and engages in the banter as well. But what our students end up saying, they say this might very well be better than typical classroom education. It's much more engaging, and it's much more convenient, obviously. I don't have to uproot my family. I don't have to leave my job. I don't have to sell my house. I can engage in this education right where I am, and it turns out to be amazingly educationally effective, this new program that we've developed. But probably the most fun part of it is when we all get together. See, we don't just sit online. We have a couple of face-to-face components in this where we all get together for 2 weeks, one summer, and then 2 weeks the following summer. And we spend 2 weeks morning, noon, and night listening to lectures, arguing about issues, and having the time of our life. Sometimes we have to encourage the students when the time is up that they do have to leave campus now. They have to go back home. They have families waiting for them. They have such a good time on campus. And we enjoy it, too. It's our favorite time of the year here on campus when the students arrive from all over the world.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you about overseas students and what sort of availability there is for people in Great Britain or Europe or, you name it.
Well, those two places, we have students, and we've had a student in Mongolia and Ethiopia, and I'm trying to think of the other furthest reaches, but we've had students in Lebanon, and we have several, American military personnel in our program, and so they're engaging us from Iraq and Afghanistan. So it is available truly from around the globe, and all that's required is a person to have some sort of internet connection so they can engage in the online graduate seminars.
Now, let's say you're talking to a young person, say a high schooler, and they're seriously considering a program like this. What sort of things should they think about in making a wise decision?
That's a very good question, and I'm glad you gave me a chance to answer that. If you're in high school and you're heading for college, but you have this passion for ideas, and you're a Christian, and you want your passion for ideas to really count, apologetics really is a great way to go. When I bump into high school students who have that profile, they say, what should I major in as an undergraduate? And I tell them, major in the thing you love the most. Preferably, though, an academic subject. What do I mean by that? I mean, maybe English literature or history or even art history or one of the hard sciences, something that will give you very strong academic background. It's not as advantageous to major in a professional area of study like accounting for obvious reasons. But it's not necessary to major, say, in philosophy or biblical studies or something like that. Not necessary, but it can be very, very helpful. Sometimes it's best if our students come to us with a real broad base, like they did do a degree in biological sciences or art history or something. They bring some wonderful insights that the rest of us don't have. I just love that cross-disciplinary fertilization that takes place. So my best advice is major in the thing you love the most. Something that you can really give your heart and mind to. And do it really well at the undergraduate level. There's going to be plenty of time to do the theology, the philosophy, and the apologetics proper when you get to graduate school.
What sort of advice would you give to someone who's kind of teetering and they're thinking, boy, I keep hearing about this, and, how do I know if I'm really should do that?
Oh, that's an easy question to answer. I always introduce them to our certificate program in Christian apologetics. This is really important. Some people are kind of kicking the tires for the Master of Arts program because, maybe they already have a master's degree. Maybe they already have a doctorate. Or, on the other hand, maybe they don't have a bachelor's degree, so they wouldn't qualify for a Master of Arts program. We have a wonderful program called the Certificate Program in Apologetics that anybody can sign up for. In fact, we have people who do have doctorates, and they're signed up in the program. We have inmates in California prisons signed up for the program. We have high school students who do it. But it's a program that can be done completely at a distance. You can listen online or on CDs, and we have this wonderful set of study materials that goes along with it. And we make a rather bold claim. We claim that if people go through our certificate program in Christian apologetics, and people have ravenously done the entire thing in a couple of weeks, you can stretch it out over a couple of years if you'd like, or even a couple of months, but some people get really crazy and do it in a couple of weeks. But I make this claim, if you do the entire certificate program, you will rise to the top 5% of religiously literate people in the world. Now, some people hear me say that and say, wow, that must be some certificate program. Well, I say to them, it is a wonderful certificate program, but the comment is really not about the certificate program. It's about the incredibly low level of understanding about these things out in the general public. You see, if you do even a little bit of formal study in this, you really do rise to the top levels. And some of our certificate recipients have gone on to do some wonderful things. Many of them have become what I call the water cooler gurus of their workplace. And that is, if there's a big controversy that pops up, about religion or about UFOs or cloning or some big moral issue, I think the people in the workplace know that the person who's done some formal study in apologetics, especially earning a certificate, that person's going to have something interesting and thoughtful to say about it. And they are right on the money. And that's become the profile of the person who earns the certificate. And plus, you can actually turn the certificate into up to 6 units of credit towards the Master of Arts degree. So it's a great way to kick the tires and check it out.
Excellent. Well, I would say to those who are listening who this sort of thing appeals to you, just do it. You know who you are out there, so just go ahead and do it. Now, Craig, for those people who they're doing apologetics in some manner right now, maybe a small scale or a big scale, what sorts of habits or skills do you think are the most essential to having a balanced perspective and an effective influence?
Yeah, very important question. Sometimes, and we see this a lot, the people who are attracted to apologetics are usually in love with ideas, and they tend to think the whole world just runs on the basis of ideas, that everybody wants to sort of engage in intellectual discourse and banter back and forth. And sometimes people who learn some of these important and very persuasive ideas like arguments for God's existence, evidence for the resurrection, and so on, tend to, bash people over the head with some of these ideas. And clearly, that's really not going to win the day. I mean, every apologist has heard the idea that, who wants to win the argument and lose the soul? Well, although that's kind of a hackneyed expression, it's still true. What I've learned as I've grown older as a Christian apologist, the most important thing is being a well-rounded Christian. Being able to articulate the great truths of the Christian faith and defend them is a very important thing. But we also have to be thoroughly in love with Jesus, and we have to have a real heart for the lost. And if we can cultivate all of those things together, we become just a powerhouse for God. Very often we leave out one of those elements, right? We don't do the hard intellectual work, and so we really don't have answers for people. Or we don't cultivate compassion, and so we really don't, we can't minister to people in their pain. So we have to be able to do all of that in order to be deeply effective. It seems to me that that's exactly the profile Jesus exhibits to us, and so we want to model him in every way possible.
Now, before we close, I want to ask you one more question along a similar lines. And as you teach this subject, if there was only one lesson that you could impart to your students, what would it be?
It's loving God with all your mind and everything else you got. We emphasize the mind in apologetics, and it's important that we do, because there's a lot of segments of the church that don't emphasize the fact that this is true and knowable, and that we are truly in possession of the great story that of all that ever was, is, or will be. And we have a tremendous obligation to tell people about that and answer their questions. It's a great calling. But on the other hand, that great message will be lost if we're not actually sensitive to the people with whom we're discussing these matters. And we're not cognizant of the idea that these are people whose souls are lost and need to be reconnected with the Creator God through the blood of His Son, Jesus Christ. So it's all about Jesus at the end of the day. And I think that's what makes the most effective apologist, is a person who's sold out to the Lord Jesus Christ and wants to see His kingdom move forward in any way it can. And to remember that life is very short and that we want to make it count for Him no matter what.
Well, Craig, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
My pleasure, Brian, and you keep up the great work. One last comment. I know you have a lot of wonderful audio resources on your website, and that is a tremendous boost to the Christian community. And one thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about my development as an apologist was that I listened to things over and over and over again, and it was one of the best forms of training I could get, because it wasn't long after listening to these things that the speaker's vocabulary became my vocabulary, and their ideas became my ideas. And I'm a big fan of listening to really good apologetic teaching, and you've provided a wonderful resource.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Well, we've been speaking with Craig Hazen, Director of the MA program in Christian Apologetics at Biola University. Be sure to check out today's blog post, where you can find links to his books, articles, the Philosophia Christi journal, and more information about Biola's apologetics program. I also want to take a moment to remind you that you can subscribe to the Apologetics 315 interviews via iTunes. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, I encourage you to leave a positive rating as well. This is Brian Auten of Apologetics 315, and thanks for listening.